Hey, kia ora koutou whānau, welcome back to another edition of Big Hero News. Chewie, I was just realising that whilst we were looking at things together, we never actually checked the audio. So, good evening, everyone. Just bringing up some chill music in the background to make sure that's all working. How you doing, Chewie? What's going on, brother?
Smooth jams. I was just
nice.
tried a matching colour scheme, but it's hard to find one that doesn't make me look too sexy.
The blue was good. I like the blue.
You like the blue? We'll go blue.
Yeah.
There we go.
Nice. Yeah, no, things are rocking and rolling. Chewie, how you been, mate? How's the day been?
Yeah, first day back at work. I just love the fact that the first question that I walked in, because we've been shut for two days while this store refit's been happening.
Yep.
And we put a line of posters along the window going, "We are closed for 2 days. Here's our customer service line. Here's common things that you can do yourself. You don't have to come here for a top-up." And the first question I asked the builders when I came in, because they were still there, I was like, how many people tried to come in? And the guy was like, we could not believe that, how many old people tried to force the door open.
Wow.
Even with the builders, like with dust sheets over all the displays and people hammering away and like taking big chunks of the wall out. And they're just shouting at the door because they're tradies. They don't have to do customer service. We're closed. We're closed. Hilarious. Love it.
Good evening to everyone in the chat. Good to see you all. Hey Jeremy. Hey JK. Hey Rob. Evening Beardy Weirdies. Paul's already getting into it, talking about Brett Weinstein, which we're going to talk about today. JN, evening all. Emma, evening, and it goes on. Good to see you all. Yes, it's going to be an interesting show tonight. And I did a bit of research over the weekend, and I found this really interesting clip from Brett Weinstein. He is one of him and his brother, Eric, I think it's his brother, isn't it? Was sort of the guys who started up what is commonly referred to as the intellectual dark web, which many people call the intellectual dork web. But you get people like Sam Harris and him and Joe Rogan, and these guys are said to be a part of this group, the free thinkers of this world.
I already hate it.
I don't want to. Do I want to spoil it? I don't want to spoil it too much because it's got to do with Nazis.
This, and you've spent days on this. Don't spoil it.
Brett Weinstein, in the middle of a live stream, had an epiphany, and he was like, "I can't believe what I'm seeing." And what he's seeing is something we've been talking about for a very long time when it comes to the right wing's dilemma. And one of the priests of the IDW, one of the priests of we're just asking questions, one of the priests of, we're talking about facts here, not about feelings, has had an epiphany over the weekend and has come to a realization of something we've been talking about for a very long time. So that means we're the super intellectual dark web, I think, officially, Chewie. We'll be the super. Maybe we're the intellectual light web, because it's like the opposite, but, bring some light to the dark. Anyway, so we'll get into that as we go through the night. It's going to be an interesting... Sorry, I'm just looking at Caitlin's comment. Hey, Caitlin.
Yeah, no, that was a cracker.
Yeah, we'll get into what it's all about. It's actually, and the reason I wanted to find a way to talk about this well and not kind of just ass around with it, but we've had some events over the last 36 hours that has dropped a couple of people and a couple of people groups and organizations into our Twitter feeds. Didn't welcome them in, didn't talk to them. They found us and they jumped in. And some of the people that have jumped into our Twitter feeds over the last 36 hours are people who need to hear Brett Weinstein's message. So We're going to talk about it. So we're going to talk about it tonight. Before we do that, though, I want to say huge thanks and hello to all our lovely patrons. Thanks so much for being on board, guys. We appreciate you. The people who have also bought our merch, our first drop from that wrapped up last Thursday. I got emails from the printers yesterday saying they've ordered all the T-shirts. The T-shirts should have probably have been there today. They'll probably start printing them tomorrow, and hopefully we'll have them out the door by Friday, maybe to you in the weekend or by Monday, depending on how New Zealand Post handles them. And then, of course, we want to have a whole ton of photos on various social media sites, hashtagging BHN, so we can see you wearing your merch when it turns up. And looking at doing another merch drop next month. And we are definitely going to be doing a BHN top, because that was requested by numerous people last month. So a BHN top, and there'll be some kind of acknowledgement on the back for probably all of this year that it's an original top. So like when we're bigger than Hosking and people are buying our merch every single day, you'll be able to wear yours with perhaps an OB on the back, and an original beardy that says you've been with us since day one. And not an OG, an OB. I think that'll be something like that. But that'll be next month. We'll talk about that as we go. Right, Chewie, is there anything you want to say or get into or mention? Or please don't tangent me tonight. There's too much to get through. But is there anything you want to kick off with before we're going to do Kiri Allan first? Because Kiri Allan,
you've left the floor clear to me. Let me talk about a few of my passion projects for the next 45 minutes. No, Pat, I don't have anything. I won't get in the way of this runaway freight train of a show that we have tonight.
Well, here's the first one that we obviously have heard more news on today, and we talked about this obviously heavily last night. It's the Kirtapu Allan latest announcement that she is removing herself from politics altogether.
East Coast MP Kiri Allan is stepping out of the political arena and won't stand at the next election. The former Justice Minister is facing criminal charges after a car crash in Wellington on Sunday night. Yesterday, she lost her ministerial jobs and now says she needs some time out. Here's political editor Jessica Mackay with developments.
These signs on the main road in Gisborne are set to come down, with Kiri Allan phoning the Prime Minister this afternoon saying she won't stand at the next election.
I regard Kiri as an exceptionally talented person who's clearly going through hell at the moment.
Somebody who I regard as a good friend, and so very sad to see her not running again.
A tragic end to a promising career.
In a statement, she says for now, it's time to step out of the arena. I'm not sure how long for or if I'll return. I need to take time to heal myself and chart a new course for my life. This morning, the Prime Minister said the offending was too serious for her to be a minister again.
You didn't leave Kiri Allan much choice though, did you? Because she wouldn't have been a minister while you're in charge.
Look, I mean, I have to be upfront with people.
In her Instagram post, the former public and commercial lawyer says she's angry with herself and prays this doesn't damage Labour's chances.
She's sick, our girl, and this is just heartbreaking stuff. Yeah, we tried, a number of us tried very hard with her, and we thought, it's not right to blame the Prime Minister. I was part of the facilitation in terms of bringing her back.
Her departure prompted a reshuffle yesterday, including for David Parker. He's been vocal about his disappointment that the Prime Minister didn't like his tax.
Yeah, this is probably, I don't want to say this is actually worse than Kirtapu Allan stepping away, but basically have your revenue minister go, I'm out of here because I don't like the direction of our revenue gathering. It is another feather in the attack quiver of the National Party.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't put that together.
No, he actually says it. That's what's being said.
Tax ideas.
Why did you want to give up the revenue portfolio? Was it because of the wealth tax and the capital gains tax failing to get across the line?
Look, you know my views on those things. I thought it was untenable for me to continue, so I suggested to Chris that it was in the best interest of him and the party that someone else take that role.
Isn't it a vote of no confidence in his tax policies that as Minister of Revenue was so disillusioned he resigned his portfolio instead of just serving until the election?
No, I don't think so. I've tried to do this in a way that makes it as smooth as possible for Chris Hipkins. I'm a loyal member of the Labor Party. I don't want to cause disturbances.
I think it's just another daily soap opera, isn't it, really?
They can't field a full team, and I think they're now effectively a caretaker government.
A team now rushing to find a new East Coast candidate.
You know what I was thinking? Actually, that's what we need to hear from these guys for tonight, because then they're just going some comedy. I've got another clip to play from One News as well. But what I was thinking was this, if you actually have a look who's left and who's gone from National since just prior to the last election, not for the same reasons, but, like we know, 7 leaders in 7 years, I was reminded of a story that Dave Grohl told on the documentary Back and Forth. Dave Grohl was the 5th drummer of Nirvana. He was the 5th drummer of Nirvana, but they got rid of all their ugliness before Nirvana made it big. The conversation's been told in a way that there was a whole bunch of drummers that came and went from the Foo Fighters, and it was very public. And Dave's like, I was the 5th drummer of Nirvana. It just happened before we got big. It feels a bit like that. It feels like the National Party has had a whole bunch of people leaving, retiring, being moved on, that sort of thing as well. But it happened in the past far enough back that it's not being reflected in the election today. Yeah. Whereas the Labour Party is going through some of the stuff, and I'm not actually comparing like for like. Being arrested as a minister is the most serious, but it's happening right at the forefront of when we're thinking about electing a new party, as opposed to before they were made famous. And I think that's a part of what's going on right now.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, look, over the past 2-3 years with COVID and that sort of thing, there would have been a lot of people that were like, there's no way I'm leaving the party now. Like, it's a full team effort. And then I kind of mentioned this last night, is you always get some churn in the run up to an election as people just decide whether they want to contest it and to step down with enough time for someone to slot in. And National's already done that. And through their whole process, that was chaos, because every time they put up a candidate, he was a deviant or he had a literal cupboard full of skeletons.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think those guys are being a bit too smug there. And I think Arrest JK absolutely nails it here. Seymour, the only ACT MP we'll ever see talks about a full team. Yeah, we see Seymour. We sometimes see as 2IC. We never hear from anyone else.
Look, you're right. You're right, Chewie. But the unfortunate thing is, it's like, I know everyone hates my sporting analogies, but if the All Blacks were crap 3 years ago outside of Rugby World Cup year and they were brilliant this year, then you forget about all the crap stuff. If South Africa were brilliant for the last 3 years and they fall over this year, all you're going to remember is the World Cup this year. All you're going to remember is the election this year. So it's really about what's happening now in the eyes of the public. I also want to play this other clip from One News, and they were talking about the scrutiny on the way politics works. It's a couple of minutes. I think it's an interesting look at mental health issues and how we should be handling maybe MPs and the MPs' workload, thinking about them as human beings. I know it's a crazy thought, but this is from One News tonight as well.
How much workload pressure and workplace culture have contributed to Kiri Allan's personal distress is hard to tell, but her downfall's prompting fresh scrutiny over the way politics works in New Zealand. Deputy Political Editor Mikey Sherman has more.
Politics is many things, a contest of ideas, lively debate, celebration and even hugging cute babies. But it can also be brutal.
It's a rough game, there's no doubt about that.
It's a bit of a blood sport.
Toxic.
Personalised attack.
Politics is a rough and tumble business, but ultimately we're all responsible as well for our own actions.
The relentless nature on display this afternoon, the Speaker approving the ACT Party's request for an urgent debate, despite the fact Kiri Allan had already offered a full resignation.
We shouldn't be here debating a deeply personal, tragic circumstance.
It's just not acceptable to have a Minister of the Crown who is breaking multiple laws on one night.
But we know that, and that's why there's been the consequences that there's been. We'll get to this. No, I know that you've got a bee in your bonnet about how repugnant this is, that Seymour called for this after she had resigned to point score against Labour and Kiri Allan. That's all it is, because this is going to lead to nothing other than grandstanding, literal grandstanding, as you see him standing there in the grandstand.
Breaking multiple laws in the same night. He makes it sound like it was a fucking crime spree.
But he's also stating something like, we have to change it. This is not, we know it's not acceptable. Everyone knows it's not acceptable. That's why she's lost her position and her livelihood and her job and face and her mana and everything, because it's not acceptable.
Oh, he's the worst. He's just the worst person.
I managed when I actually flicked over and watched a little bit of this live, and the bit with Grant Robertson was quite heartfelt. I remember watching it thinking, I wonder how they're going to respond to this. They do a little clip from this. I'll play this for you.
On one night.
Preying on the imperfections. It's part of what we do here, and it's not always right.
Some Wahine Māori MPs arguing they're scrutinised more than...
The Grant Robinson bit, he was also talking, he put his hand up and says, I've been guilty of it, you've been guilty of it, we've all been guilty of it, I shouldn't be doing it. Now, on some level, I kind of go, well, if you're in the opposing side, would you be taking that line? Are you doing it to defend yourself? But I think we've got some evidence for how Labour would handle this in the form of Muller falling over. And yes. I'm going to play you something about that shortly. So we can actually look to how Labour reacted when a National Party leader fell over. So I think even though Grant Robinson there might have been some politics in that to say, leave us alone, it looks bad, there's also evidence behind what Labour's been saying about how they treated National and a National Party leader when he fell over, albeit not exactly the same, no crimes, no nothing, but the mental health issue when he fell over, what they did.
Any other.
Everyone's up for scrutiny, but there has to be a balance to that, and we saw a total imbalance, and we continue to see that in this place. What's happened to Kirtapu, me and Mecca, very different, but the fact it's happened to 3 wahine Māori from the Tairāwhiti or Takatapu says there's something systemic going on.
Todd Miller bowed out as National Party leader after his battle with mental health.
You know, you recall back to what you went through and get a sense of how hard it is for her at the moment.
Ian Lees-Galloway also forced to rebuild himself after being dismissed as a minister in 2020.
This is going to take time, and there's layers that Kiri has to work through.
But despite all that, many MPs don't believe a major overhaul is needed.
You've got to be able to get on and do the job. That's what you put your hand up for.
I signed up for this job knowing the expectations.
We're rightly expected to have high standards and work hard.
Standards in the spotlight once more.
Right, there you go. So, Chewie, I've got more to play about this, a couple more clips and a couple more articles. But first of all, I know that you wanted to talk about David Seymour calling that urgent, and also, I guess, the Speaker saying they could do it. It seems a bit bizarre, but...
Oh, look, Seymour calling for this debate and this urgent debate with all the facts that he would have known at that point is absolute gutter politics. He saw a way to... essentially concern troll. I'm concerned about, the pressures on ministers, and then immediately pivot as soon as he possibly could into attacking Labour over it. I'm not surprised. That's his style. He's a toad of a man.
When Winston Peters comes across as the person with moral standing, you then have to question. So this is what Winston Peters said about the call for that urgent debate, right? This is a tweet from Winston today. It is shocking to see an urgent debate in Parliament today being taken on Kiri Allan. There are times when some things should not be politicised. This situation with Kiri Allan should be one of them. It puts one in mind of the saying, when a hero stumbles, the cowards rejoice. Nothing feels better to a coward than to see a brave person fall. Fall or
That's
fail?
A good quote.
Fall.
Yeah.
And so when Winston Peters is the voice of reason and of empathy and of that, it's like if for him to be there, you got to wonder how far over the mark Mr. Seymour has to be.
I'm glad you mentioned empathy, because those little sound bites from various ministers and that sort of thing, quite interesting that they started with people that had issues. And I was a little bit surprised about how tame Muller's was, considering that if we're talking about someone that had a mental health crisis in the job and was treated quite well at the time by the media, by political commentators, and by the opposing party, I just would have liked to see him stand up a bit against what was coming out of his party. And then there was the 3 guys at the end with just the least empathetic comments I could have ever expected. Oh, it's part of the job. There's an expectation. Yeah. But has nothing ever gone wrong in your life? Have you never been in a position like that? Just bizarre.
This is when I start to get in trouble, when I start to sort of riff and freewheel sort of thing, because I've been mulling something over to do with empathy for the last wee while, Chewie. And this might get me in trouble with some people, and I acknowledge it might get me in some trouble. So please take this as an initial thoughts, because I've been thinking about facts. Don't know, me and Chewie have done the political compass and we've broadcast it. We don't hide anything. Here is an example of the 2017 political compass. Me and Chewie were down here in the sort of libertarian left, right? The libertarian left. I was thinking about this the other day. As I say, give me some grace because it's not fully formed yet, but because we're talking about empathy. What I think I've found quite often is those that sit on the right, both authoritarian and libertarian, they tend to have facts without empathy, right? Think about the debates you're hearing. They will give you facts with zero empathy. The people who sit way up the top here on the left authoritarian, I'm not saying everybody over there, but way up there, they often have empathy without facts, because they will deny some things, some scientific truths or whatever, but they'll go empathy first and they'll ignore some of the facts. And then down the bottom, ironically, where me and Chewie sit, you tend to get facts and empathy, because that's why me and Chewie, and I don't want to speak too much on behalf of you, Chewie, that we don't fit very well quite often with people who are up here on the left, because I think sometimes when we use facts, they don't maybe like them so much, and so we get thrown out of the boat, which has happened to us in the past before. This is not a fully thought out thought yet, but this is where I came to. All of the right do facts without empathy. Some on the authoritarian left do empathy without facts, and some on the libertarian left do empathy and facts. I don't know what you think about that, Chewie. I've never spoken to Chewie about this, which is why it sometimes gets me in trouble to throw things out there. What do you think about that little bit of initial analysis?
I just pointing that inward, that seems to fit quite well with me. Like, I do try to have empathy for people. I think it's one of the most important emotional traits that someone can have is the ability to put themselves in the position of someone else.
Yeah.
And it surprises me a lot when someone lacks that empathy. I mean, you see that a lot in comment boards, and certainly reading through stories about Kiri Allan's situation. There are a lot of people that have the minds of sharks, completely without empathy, that are just piling on and just, as you said, well, she broke the law. Yes, she did. And that's why she's lost her position and status and has resigned essentially in disgrace. But you can sort of have those things and go, like, we haven't said that she should stay, as an example, right? It just stands to order. She could not politically survive this. If she tried to stay on, she'd do damage to the party that she was on. There was no way that the Prime Minister was going to let that stand. It was just a given. There wasn't a bad decision or a decision that didn't make sense in that whole chain of events.
Yeah.
But you can also hold that fact in your head and go, Jesus, it must be horrible for her at the moment. Like, her whole world has collapsed. And also have a thought for the future, and that I hope she can rebuild and come back. I hope she can survive this politically. Whether she decides to or not, or whether she can, I don't know. But by all accounts, she was an excellent MP for her area. She was an excellent cabinet minister with a lot of promise. I mean, there were people talking about her being a potential prime minister at some point. Like, it's a hell of a fall. So, empathy and facts. I like that.
Yeah. Let's have a look at this now. Now, to go to the empathy and facts thing, this is when Todd Miller fell over. This is what the MPs were asking, the national MPs were asking for Todd Miller.
Yeah, I'm very sorry for Todd Miller, actually. He's been a delight to deal with. He's been extremely well-mannered, respectful, and good to work with.
Is this your time?
I don't know, but I think it's a very sad time for Todd and his family. He's asked for privacy, and I think we should give it to him.
Yeah, I think we were all taken by surprise, but look, my thoughts are with Todd and his family. Obviously, it's a very difficult time for him, and so our thoughts are with him.
But what's important is that at this time we have compassion for Todd and that we get to work through this process.
Do you think my thoughts at the moment are for Todd Miller and his family, so anything else can wait for a while.
Do you know who's running?
I don't.
Have you been approached by anyone at all?
That's a matter for caucus members, and we'll keep that tight amongst ourselves.
Today's a difficult day for the National Party, but we will get through these difficult times and we'll get focused on the election campaign as a united team.
Obviously we're meeting today. It's a very important time for us to just consider things, yeah.
What's the problem for Todd Miller that he just couldn't get the caucus behind him?
Look, I don't think so. I think we're a good team, and it's been a pretty tough week last week, and I think that was obviously a contributing factor.
And who will you be voting for?
I actually have to look to see who's putting their hand up.
So we're going to go into now more about the leadership challenge, but you could see, especially at the start, it was all compassion, all, let's just think about them. There's nothing else that matters right now, something that they're not offering Kiri Allan. The other thing is we're talking about the leadership. I actually looked for some clips. I know there were some news clips of the day, but I couldn't. I spent about 20 minutes, half an hour trying to find something, but I couldn't. But I found this from Labour leader Jacinda Ardern when Todd Miller fell over. Did she stand up in the House and point to, the National Party and the failings of the National Party, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? No, she said this. I've just heard the news about the resignation of Mr. Miller as leader of the National Party. No matter what side of Parliament you're sitting, politics is a difficult place. I have passed on my best wishes to Mr. Miller and his family. Done. End of conversation from me.
Yeah, absolutely. There was no point in scoring points, and that was kind of my gold standard here, right? Is that so much of what David Seymour and National are saying are things that do not really need to specifically be said out loud. Like, people can draw their own conclusions, or they could wait 3-4 days and just get back. Because what they're essentially doing is they're pivoting as quickly as they can to their already existing talking points, right? There's no new line of attack on Labour. It's the same thing that they've been saying. It's just now they've got another name that they can add to the tally. So then why not just take a beat and just make an actual human statement and just leave that person alone? That's, and then you go back to the same thing that you've been saying. You can call them the coalition of chaos or whatever thing you've pillaged from the Conservative Party from the last trip to England or whatever. But it's ugly. And I mean, there are people that are reveling in the ugliness of it. There's someone on our Facebook at the moment is currently wildly misinterpreting what we were talking about last night. It's ugly. As a person,
that Chippy did the right thing altogether. That she was in the wrong. That this is the appropriate response.
And the comparison that we're making with Todd Miller is not comparable because he wasn't.
We're talking about people's mental health.
Yeah, exactly. We're talking about mental health. We're not talking about
how an opposing party reacted to the downfall of someone via mental health. And I said pretty clearly it's not the same because we're not talking crimes. We're talking about mental health. Yeah. Anyway, let's not feed the trolls tonight. Two separate issues. And we are not debating that Kiri Allan broke the law and the appropriate thing for her was to resign. And the right thing for her was to completely resign. Yep, she's done today.
It's not working for her. It's damaging for her. So, that's fine. No debate there. I don't think I've seen a single comment on the left saying that she should have stayed on.
The only thing
we're talking about is how empathetic the House is. Yeah. And at what point do you put politics aside, just make an empathetic statement and leave it? Just leave it at that. Resist the temptation to try and stick the boot in because you're a couple of weeks out.
Well, that's what they've done. They've stuck the boot in. And I mean, I've been saying it for weeks. I think that National's got its nose ahead. I heard Matt McCartan talking on Bomber's show tonight as I was getting ready. Matt McCartan, of course, famous lefty and advisor and trade unionist and all those things, talking about he reckons it's 50-50 now. He reckons Labour was just had their nose ahead recently. Now it's 50-50. I disagree. I think that it was closer to 50-50 previously, and National's got their nose ahead now. However, the point that Matt made, maybe we'll play this tomorrow night, is that now that election season is ramping up, he didn't use these words, but if Chippy decimates Luxon in the debates and stuff, that might bring it back to a 50-50 game. Who knows? What did they say? A week is a long time in politics. Guess we'll wait and see. And look, I'm not saying this from an ideological point of view. I mean, I've already said this sounds really horrible, Chewie, but we would probably do better financially and viewership-wise if National won. Honestly, we probably would, because we'd be able to go out and point out all these things every night that our natural audience wants to hear. But I don't want them to win. But I'm also aware that at the moment they've got their nose ahead. And we've been saying for weeks that at the very least it's on a knife edge. At the very best for National, they've got their nose ahead. At no stage have I said I think that Labor has got their nose ahead. I've certainly always said knife edge or National's got their nose ahead. And we'll stick with that because we do try and call it like we say it. And I think that's probably a fair analysis right now. It's not going to be 10 plus seats like someone said the other day, but any more. I mean, there probably will become a point, Chewie, where there might be a point of no return. I think Tova O'Brien wrote for Stuff, she's a new Stuff political editor, yesterday, that she asked the question, did they just lose the election yesterday? I don't think they lost the election, but like I said last night, I think the hill is a bit steeper to climb now than it was. I think that's a fair analysis.
Yeah, look, I'm no cheerleader for Labor. I think they have been doing all that they can to punch themselves in the face solidly for the last couple of months. And there's only so long you can cruise on, Jacinda's legacy and the COVID response, and I think we're seeing that. And as someone that's on the left, that is concerning. Like part of the political race is the game, right? And you want your team to win, but the other part of it is there can be just real long-term damage done to society and the way that the country runs if you get the wrong government at the wrong time.
For sure.
And I think with all the challenges that we have in front of us in the global situation and that sort of thing, I think an austerity National getting in on the backs of, it's not like if Labor was getting voted out because they mismanaged the country, fair cop. For a couple of ministers having literal brain explosions 6 months out from the election, I think it's a horrible way to lose, right?
Yeah,
and,
but
an austerity-driven National Act government is really scary because there's a lot of people that are, right on the line of being fed and housed. I don't want to see another, what National did to the country in the 90s. We're still dealing with that. I don't want another swing at that. So I think the next couple of political polls are going to be really interesting. We'll see where people swing.
Yep. I mean, if people run away from Labor and run to the Greens, it might not make a big difference. But we'll see. We'll see. Hey, we're going to keep moving because we do have, this is going to be quite a big block now of 2 or 3 things back to back. And it's going to pick up on some of the things we talked about last night to do with Victoria Jakobs being assaulted, in my honest held belief, being assaulted at the Julian Batchelor meeting. 2 or 3 of these things, and then we're going to get into the big conversation tonight about Brett Weinstein. So as you guys know, I often make my notes for the show on Twitter. So some people may have already seen this, but this is what I put out today. Just for clarity for the ignorant. Free speech legislation in New Zealand comes under freedom of expression and gives you that, and this is a direct quote from the legislation, quote, right to freedom of expression means you have the right to seek, receive and provide, in brackets, impart, information and opinions of any kind in any form. This would include whistles. That last part's not part of the legislation, but I'm just saying. Of any form, this would include whistles. Technically, the men at the Julian Batchelor meeting censored Victoria Jakobs' free speech. Anyone want to defend her right to free speech? Which has obviously put a few cats amongst the pigeons because it hasn't been part of the conversation. The other thing was for people who are claiming that the event was private, so removal of Victoria Jakobs was fine, are wrong. An assault is, and this is again from legislation, an act of intentionally applying or attempting to apply force to the person of another. That's it. And there is nothing in legislation that puts a private setting in the legislation to mitigate what an assault is. So I'm real sorry to have to be the bearer of bad tidings. It was an assault, and she did get her free speech impinged upon. Now, this is the whole debate. When you have two parties, both with rights to speak, both with rights to speech, and they try to drown each other out, that is an issue. You can't go, those people have more rights than those people. That's not how free speech works. That's not how freedom of expression works. Just because you've booked a hall doesn't mean you get to assault someone because their speech is drowning out your speech. Now, you might have the opinion that you should be able to. Fine, we can debate that. But I'm telling you legally, you don't have a right to do that. And I hope, and there's a very good chance we'll be talking to Victoria Jakobs this week. I've already heard from a mutual connection that she wants to talk to us. So hopefully we will. But I hope she brings charges, because if you're seeing it, charges being laid for things like tomato juice, then you need to see charges being laid for this kind of physical assault, meaning touching, unwanted touching. You need them to be there. The other thing I did, Chewie, was I put out there, I got this is the legislation, so people know. Your right to freedom of expression is you have the right to seek, receive, and provide information and opinions of any kind or any form. So there it is in writing. That's another thing. I'll go on to the next thing in a minute about free speech union. But there's part one, Chewie.
I mean, one thing that I want to say about that, right, is often with legislation, right, you don't get necessarily everything meshing together really well. So, I mean, there would be a question there for me, and I'd love to discuss it with someone, or if someone knows more about this sort of stuff than I do in the chat, fucking have at it. But that makes it very clear that you can go and get or talk about whatever you want without much interference.
Yeah.
But then how does that play with, say, inciting racial hatred?
If there's a call to action, that could make a difference, right? And
but if I wanted to hire a hall and just basically do a PowerPoint lecture on, actually Hitler had some pretty good ideas and I want to expand on those.
Yep.
And people quite rightly did not like that.
Yep.
You can go, oh, but it's my freedom of expression. But then that crashes into inciting racial hatred.
Well, with respect, I think under the freedom of speech, freedom of expression laws, if there's not an explicit call to violence or an explicit call to action, so if your speech in it you were saying, and so now we need to go out and find people of Jewish origin and smash them up, that would be the line. So if it's just theories and words, it's protected. But what you can do is if someone else who doesn't like that speech wants to drown that speech out. And look, there's this conversation going around at the moment about civil discourse. Like, I just can't imagine all those people, like in the 1980s, right, with apartheid. Did you know that that it was well known that Nelson Mandela heard about what happened in Waikato when the protesters stopped the game between the Springboks? He heard about that in Ellis Island, and it gave him strength to continue his fight. Does anyone want to go back now and go, oh, those protesters during apartheid, they should have been civil. They should have just sat outside the stadium and let the game go on. Like, I'm not saying that I want to hear violence or I want to see it or anything like that, but this call from people like the Free Speech Union for civil discourse. I'm actually about civil discourse. I'm cool with civil discourse, but it's not like a foundational necessity for things like protest. Sometimes civil, great. Sometimes loud and raucous, but in my opinion, never violent. That's my position, right? Others disagree with it. There are people in various groups who think violence is the answer. Not mine. Sometimes civil, sometimes loud and raucous, never violent. But there seems to be some who are basically saying, and I'm exaggerating on purpose here, but like, oh look, you brown people are just protesting in the wrong way. You need to protest in the way that we deem okay.
That's absolutely a thing.
You women, you are just protesting in the wrong way. You minority, you need to protest in the approved way, the way that the majority have approved you to protest. It's like, well, No, that's not how it works.
That's actually a really good point. Look at literally any protest lately, right? And I'll talk about both sides. Like I will talk about the parliamentary protest as well, right? That's always a common thing that people say. Well, you know, they're protesting wrong. You know, the guys that are gluing themselves to the highways to stop oil or to railway lines to stop coal and that sort of thing. Sometimes it's uncomfortable to sort of go, oh yeah, that's my team, but I don't agree with how they did that. I mean, you talk about, you know, being uncomfortable with violence. Look, I would say read up on how Liverpool treated Oswald Mosley.
I know,
in the
I know.
UK in
And
the
look,
60s.
look, I've got it. I'm just saying, for me, that would be a line.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want to be involved in any kind of violent response as a form of protest. And I know people do, and I actually will denounce it. We have different opinions. People on the left and the right would think violence is okay in some instances. I don't. Mine is civil discourse, great. Sometimes loud and raucous, great. Never violent. That's where my personal
I would say
ideology is.
seldom violent. You know,
Well,
you can't
can I
say
put it
that,
this?
like,
Can I put it?
if
Let me
Hitler
put it this
got
way.
hit in the face with a brick in the early days, I think.
Yeah, but we're not talking. We're not talking hypothetical. I guess I'm talking in reality today. I mean, when I say never violent, what I'm also saying is never instigating. Like if, for example, you were at a peaceful protest and you were, approached and attacked and violence was committed on you, a response, I'm not saying is inappropriate, but I'm just saying for me, like, I mean, we've said it, the Albert Park situation, they should never have gone past those barriers. They should never have gone past those barriers, in my opinion. Some people are going to say that's exactly the right thing to do. I don't think so. I support.
I think we
right.
both said that on the day. Actually,
100%.
When those barriers came down, that was a big turning point.
And where we need to be, all of us, right, is if you can't accept, right, that I think that the barriers shouldn't have been crossed, and I can't accept that you've got a different position, then we're at an impasse, right? And this is what has happened to this show before, and I know we don't talk about this anymore, and I promise we wouldn't, when we got thrown out of the boat. It's like we are actually still in the same sea. We might be in our own little boat sailing behind all the big ones, but you know, we'll fill your sails. But you're not going to get me involved, or you're not going to get me to ever support the idea of violence when it comes to protest. You're just not. Not when I say violence, I'm saying again, initiating violence. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, for this woman that got assaulted at the Julian Batchelor thing, you know, my first thought is that's not the way that I would have done it. You know, I had plans to sneak in here. I had plans to disrupt. I noticed that someone in Dunedin did something very similar, but with a bit more class than what I was going to do. Is they dressed up like a monkey, and they just danced around the venue in front of Julian, just distracting everybody. Yeah, I mean the whistle thing is incredibly annoying, but that's fine. Protest is annoying sometimes.
Let's have a look at some of the other thoughts that came through on Twitter today. And I'm sorry, I'm not just trying to put up my own Twitter feed here just to show everyone, look what I've been tweeting, but it's where I do notes.
It's actually not Twitter anymore, by the way, Pat. It's
fuck off. I know. Hello, 1990s are calling Elon. They want their fucking X back. So here we go.
Elon wants his X back too.
This is the other thing. This is the other thing that I've been thinking of today. The silence is deafening from Speak Up for Women after an assault of a woman, Victoria Jakobs, by multiple men and call to pull her pants down at a Julian Batchelor meeting. It's as if this woman doesn't serve the narrative of Speak Up for Women New Zealand. And it's weird that. And then I went on to also say, pretty quiet over there as well as the Free Speech Union, seems less keen to jump to the defence of this women's speech in defence of racially charged undertones of Julian Batchelor's speech. Makes you think, and that flowed into a few conversations today as well. Speak Up for Women responded to me. And they didn't put a comment about this, but they responded to me. And they did exactly what I just said before. They said, you know, they should be able to protest within reason. So in other words, do it the correct way and we will stand by it. I'll read it out for you. We're all in favour of free speech. Should be able to, and people should be able to protest within reason. They should certainly be able to do so without being physically attacked and without threats of having their clothing removed. We don't imagine the same threat would be made towards a man. We don't know enough about the nature of her protesting to comment on whether the protesting was reasonable or force was appropriate. So they don't know enough about it. Well, they don't know enough about that. However, an article that came out this morning at 7 a.m. They seem to have enough knowledge about that one 4 hours later to say something very similar. Whether it's drag queen story time or anti-co-governance meeting, lawful gatherers must be protected. So the lawful gatherings must be protected. Now, that says to me the Free Speech Union are definitely coming on down on the side of Julian Batchelor because they're talking about protecting the gatherings. Now, again, technically from what we're talking about free speech, Victoria Jakobs was exercising her free speech in a legal way. Annoying, frustrating, wanting to be gone, but a legal way. The Free Speech Union has come down on the side of the racially charged comments, supporting that and not the other. The right to protest must be fiercely guarded, but actions in protest to prevent the speaking rights of others cannot be allowed. So what they're literally saying is we're happy to back up suppressing the speech of the protesters to protect the speech of the rally holders. And in this instance, it's protecting the speech of the racist. We'll do that by saying that the protesters must have their speech oppressed. And this is what I was saying earlier about someone's right can lead to someone else's oppression. They both have the right to free speech. It is a political statement for the Free Speech Union to back up Julian Batchelor's free speech and denounce the protesters' free speech. And this is why I said last week, in my opinion, the Free Speech Union is a psyop, is a front, is a cover that many people, some on the left, have fallen for to further right-wing talking points predominantly. Yeah, they'll throw the odd left-wing thing in there as well, like they'll defend a story time, a drag queen story time, but the majority of what they do, have a look at what they're doing, is defending and upholding right-wing talking points in the guise of free speech. Because here's an example, an exact example of them saying Julian Batchelor's free speech must be protected, the protesters' free speech cannot be allowed. That's what they're saying. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, like freedom of speech is it freedom from criticism? Isn't freedom from a counter argument? It isn't like just no contest, say whatever you want. If you want to say something that's as dreadful as Julian Batchelor's touring around, and you're going to do something as despicable as just stop, like literally stop Māori coming into the venues by saying it's a, and he goes, oh no, it's only obvious protesters that we're stopping. Yes, obvious by their skin color. Yes, we get it, Julian, you're a racist. It's at that point that I go, okay, cool. Like if you hadn't been doing that, sure, I'll just stand outside. But the moment that you start being a dick like that, then I'll use the privilege that I've got, which is my skin color, to come in and cause fucking ruckus. While the other people that you won't let in are out the side with PA. God, I love portable Bluetooth speakers.
You're you're ginger as well, so there's Celtic. So you're like me. You're like super white. You're not just white, but you're like uber super white. Oh no,
the sun hates me. Hates me and all of my people. So I know oppression. I know oppression when I see it. It's it's one of those things. It's like, oh, why are people so mad with the ideas that I have? It's because they're shitty ideas.
Yeah,
like don't. Just own it. Yes, I'm a dreadful person and people don't like me.
You are a dreadful purple as well as a person. This is the part of the conversation that we now move into talking about what's happened with Brett Weinstein. So groups, this is the thing that we've always said. Now, if you're a follower of the show, you're a watcher of the show, you'll know I've said this before. If Chewie and this is the dilemma for the right, this is the dilemma for Christopher Luxon. I don't think this is a dilemma for David Seymour because I think he welcomes it. But it is a dilemma for Christopher Luxon. How do you attract the racist, white supremacist vote without acknowledging that the racists and the white supremacists vote for you? Right? How do you do that? Now, I think that, let me just get my thoughts together here. The dilemma, that's a dilemma primarily for Luxon, but it is the one that sits on the right. That's right. I'm back with you now, baby birds. I've said this for a long time here. If we were running a podcast about car mechanics, if that was this podcast about how to fix a car, who would listen to us? People who want to fix their cars would listen to us. If a good section of your support base, I'm not saying the majority, I'm not saying everyone who votes National, is racists, white supremacists, literal Nazis, what does that say about your message? If they're the people who are attracted to a part of your message, what does that say about your message and how do you deal with it? The people who are running in these spheres, this right-wing sphere of, we're just asking questions, my facts, not feelings, these sorts of things, have to come to terms and actually ask themselves these questions. Geez, if these literal Nazis are liking what I do, Posey Parker, what does that say about what I'm doing? Now, this is where, and we talked earlier about, for me, I won't talk to you, Chewie, you can talk to yourself, where I fall out of favour with the left, right? Because there are some genuine questions to be asked about gender issues in society today, right? I will have empathy and I will look at the facts. There are some genuine questions to be asked. But when it's the Nazis that are coming along to your positioning on these sorts of questions, you have to go, what is my positioning and how am I actually addressing this to make this happen? This is from Melbourne. You all guys all know it. Supporters of anti-transgender activists have sparked outrage as they performed Nazi salutes at a protest on Melbourne on Saturday. The salutes came during a protest between two competing groups as anti-transgender activist Kelly Jane Keane continues her speaking tour of Australia before coming to New Zealand. And I think there's some footage here as well from someone's Instagram account of the Nazis walking past. There it is there.
That's a good chant, by the way.
So if I held a rally and those people turned up to my rally to echo what I was selling, I would be fucking mortified. I would be mortified if they turned up to a rally, not to shit stir, not to protest me, but to go, we support what you're saying from the front. And this is a question that the right needs to ask themselves right now. How do you feel about these people being on board with a bunch of your messaging? Yes, they're not going to be on board with all your messaging. Yes, Christopher Luxon, you're going to say the odd Māori word here and there, and they're not going to like that. But how do you feel about them being on board with a bunch of your messaging? I've got a clip to play you right now from Brett Weinstein's latest podcast, right? Where he is shocked that when he goes on to what he calls Nazi Twitter, and he spells it out very, very clearly. Let me read you the quotes, right? He's basically said, I'm not talking about the kind of Twitter where we get called Nazis, but he says places where, quote, swastikas are not viewed as negative. So that's the kind of Twitter. That part of Nazi Twitter. And he's shocked that people he knows, people he agrees with, and people who agree with him are active there. So Brett Weinstein's about to have a realization live streaming that he's got supporters and people that accept what he's saying, people that have defended them, he says that at one stage, who are literal Nazis. And this is a dilemma for the right. I'll play this for you, Chewie, and you can have a look.
I wasn't sure if I wanted to talk about this today, but I did have, again, we talked about it briefly some weeks ago, maybe a month and a half ago. I had gotten, for whatever reason on Twitter, dumped into what I call Nazi Twitter, right? And I tweeted about it yesterday or the day before, and I got back a reaction that I was not expecting. First thing is, people think that I am using that term the way it's been leveled at people like us or Bobby Kennedy, right? That I'm abusing the term, that Nazi is a buzzword and that you can tweak people's amygdala by using it.
Nope.
No. When I say Nazi Twitter, I am talking about a part of Twitter where swastikas are not viewed as negative, where Hitler is quoted in an effort to illustrate that he is not who we were told he was. In fact, the idea that is commonly circulated in this part of Twitter is that the television is lying to you, which I'm sure it is, but that the television is lying to you, that Hitler actually was not interested in war. He was interested in peace, and that the narrative that has been created around him in the aftermath of the Holocaust and World War II is a construction of, you guessed it, Jews in Hollywood.
So I'm not going to pause this for too long, but I want to make it really clear to people who are watching. Brett Weinstein is describing where he's interacting with the place he is as literal Nazis. No buzzwords, no, you're a Nazi because you've got a flag. Like actual Nazis who dig on Hitler, who blame the Jews for everything, who think the swastika is a good thing. So when I said in the description for this video, I'm not even necessarily using my words to show this connection. I'm using Brett Weinstein's, one of the priests in the IDW. This is what I'm talking about. He's made it very clear that what he's looking at is 1936 Germany, basically on Twitter, and the views coming out of it, right? And now he's about to go into a point where he's like, there's people there that I know, people there who support us. This shock from this man is amazing.
Right? Now, Amazing. But then here's the crazy part.
Crazy.
That's not every account. Okay. Most of the accounts over in that land are replying there, and there are some people over there that I know, people who have actually defended us in some cases. These people are not Nazis, but they are now trafficking in a kind of sophistication or false sophistication that I know what it is because, frankly, I wrote a paper on it in college saying here is what this impulse to genocide actually.
So be very careful here. What he's saying is these guys have been, people I know, they're good people. They've just been fooled. That's what he's saying. He's going, I can see it, big brain, but they've been fooled. Nah, or they're Nazis.
And I see it bubbling up, and I see people who are way smart enough to understand that they are in fact they have not happened on to a place where we need dissidents who can see, the true nuanced nature of Hitler. What they are is actually activating an ancient program that lives in all people that causes them to go after other people who can't defend themselves.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to parse this thing, right?
Yeah.
Because what I keep hearing is, if black pride is okay, why isn't white pride okay?
Now, there's an edit there just for time. So what he's saying is in this part of the Twitterverse where all these people are that I know are asking, why isn't white pride okay? That just so it's clear, because there was an edit there, you would have saw the white flash. I put it there on purpose. So what he's saying is all these people that I know that are in this place, these people that have been our defenders are asking, why is white pride not okay? These are the people that he's talking about.
Now, I know what the answer to that question is, to the extent that that question has an answer, and I know why it's not a completely satisfying answer. But more to the point, I put out a video on Dark Horse back in, must have been 2018, in which I said, look, if the woke revolution keeps demonizing white people as the source of all badness, then you're backing them into the wall together, and they're going to respond in a completely predictable way. Okay? I wasn't defending those people who were demonizing white folks. I actually believe this stuff. I want to live in a country where who you are at a genetic level doesn't matter, and where opportunity is distributed as widely as possible. And I want us to compete, and I want people who contribute more to get paid more, right? That's not a utopian vision. That is a place we were headed.
It's a possible vision.
It's a possible vision.
Unlike a utopian vision.
Right. So to watch people now trafficking in Hitlerian revisionism, including, seriously, we're talking about accounts who have been, in one case, an important COVID dissident account.
So you got that? COVID deniers, tied in with Hitler. And Brett Weinstein, an important COVID dissident account, right? Important. Isn't it weird that Nazism's tied in strange bedfellows with COVID deniers, vaccine deniers, anti-mandate people. Even if they're not Nazis themselves, they make for strange bedfellows.
Talking about accounts who have been, in one case, an important COVID dissident account. It's an anonymous account, so I don't know who it is. But we're talking about people who should know better.
There you go, Chewie.
I feel like I'm going crazy, Pat.
Have at it, sir. I've got two more clips from this podcast to play, but you go first, sir.
Just like, I don't know this guy. I don't know his work. I only know really what you've told me. But it's funny to see someone who is clearly, like, I might disagree with everything that he says, but he doesn't seem to be a total dumbass.
He's a genius. He's an absolute...
to see someone fucking connecting dots live on here and still completely missing the fucking point. I mean, this was something that I said right from the start of the COVID conspiracy thing. When you saw those groups, it was a really weird collection of groups, right? You had the sort of crystal energy, clean living vegan group, and then you had the Nazis. And then they came together because they had a common cause. And I was just like, no, whatever your cause is, if the Nazis join in, you kick the Nazis out. But they never did. And this was universal. This was here. This was Australia. This was Canada. This was the UK. This was North America. They all went, we are all pulling in the same direction. So we're just going to ignore the fact that these guys are Nazis. What that let into a lot of those people's groups, if you believe one conspiracy, it makes it easier to believe the others. You've spoken about that with the flat earthers and that sort of thing. If you can make the mental leap to believing something that crazy, then you can make the mental leap to another crazy thing that someone in your circle is putting forward.
Yep. And let me just for other people who don't know, he is an evolutionary biologist and a professor. So he is big brained. Him and his wife are as well. I think she is as well. And for some people who don't know, there was a situation at Evergreen State College. He resigned in the aftermath of a series of campus protests about racial equity at Evergreen, which brought Weinstein to the national attention. He's like Julian Peters, but he's for a different, he's a different part of that sort of world. That's who he is. And this is the thing, I wrote a piece a long time ago called "Intelligent Debate versus Ideology." When people have an ideology, it's listed up here as well on his Wikipedia. He's been criticised for making false statements about COVID-19 treatments and vaccines as well. When people get into that world, whether it's a flat earther or whether it's a COVID denier or an anti-mandate, whatever, it doesn't matter sometimes how smart they are. They find the cognitive dissonance to go around their intelligence to find ridiculous things. The cognitive dissonance that people must have in that world to not realise that they've got Nazis as bedfellows is just beyond belief to me. Like, honestly, it's like, as I said, that event we just showed with Posey Parker, if those people turned up to an event I was holding, I would shut the event down and run away and hide. Because if they're coming in saying, we side with you, I'd be like, what are you fucking talking about? And what Brett Weinstein has just showed us is that there is a bunch of them that side with him. And so if he doesn't have self-reflection here, I'll play another clip right now, then there's a problem. Now, there is a problem because his wife, who is also, I think, an evolutionary biologist. Let me double check that. Heather Haying is also, yes, an evolutionary biologist. She, of course, goes on to explain something quite, succinctly. And that is, of course, the left is completely to blame for this. It's all the left's fault for this whole situation. So what she's actually saying is the Nazi situation, Nazi Twitter, that's all the fault of the left.
That does not mean that we aren't interested in the modern and progress, right? And what I'm hearing from you talking about this and what I'm seeing over in relations between the sexes is...
See, there's the ideology, right? Trans issues. That's the thing for these guys, trans issues, vaccines. That's the ideology that stops intelligent debate, that stops intelligent. There's some kind of synapses in their brain, evolutionary biologists, where there's a trans issue or a vaccine issue, and it manages to leap the IQ and go from one side straight to the other. And that's one of the things for these guys.
Okay, full stop. We're done. All of that was a mistake. let's go back to trad everything, racist, misogynist, everything, homophobic, all of it, right? And it can be easy, if you're not paying any attention at all, to think that those of us who are critiquing the
I'm just asking questions.
The overreach,
critiquing. I'm just asking questions.
Bludgeoning of people with actually new racist things and newly sexist ideas are part of the problem. But
yeah, I'm not part of the problem. I'm just asking questions. Now she's going to go into a little bit as well about how, the resulting madness from the left is that people want to go back in time. We're going to talk about that as well.
It is a new, this call to tradition, this call to what has already been is so often what you're seeing and what you're calling Nazi Twitter and what I'm seeing, and I don't have a name.
Call to tradition is what you're seeing on Nazi Twitter. In other words, going back to make America great again. A call to tradition is what Nazis are talking about on Nazi Twitter.
Actual classical Nazis loved the call to tradition. That was what all their propaganda is.
So remember,
you can find these accounts on social media. The return to, they'll often be posting classical art and sculpture, and it's all very European centric. You look at those accounts, and they are a hair away from just posting Nazi propaganda.
And remember, be really clear if you're watching this and you disagree. These are not my fucking words. These are Brett Weinstein and his wife, the co-founders of the international dark web, bedmates with people like Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris and those kinds of people. She just said the callback is what we're seeing on Nazi Twitter. And remember, Brett Weinstein's already described Nazi Twitter as literal Nazis. These are their words. This is not us interpreting.
Name for it yet, but certainly what is being revealed in a lot of the trans ideology is this
Snapsies, bing.
Part of the problem, you know what I see? Oh, the problem is that women got the vote. Really? That's where we are? We're allowed to say that now? Oh, okay. So guess what, pseudo-lefties? This is your making. This is something that you have helped create. You have helped bring out into the public with strength, because you are saying things that are so insane that people are looking around going like, what can I do? Maybe the only thing I can do is to seek to reverse the clock by 150 years and see if we can't start over from there.
So I know you're keen as mustard to jump in, but remember what she just said. Nazi Twitter, Nazis are trying to jump the clock back 150 years. And it's the fault of the left.
Just the 1935, I think, is the sweet spot.
And I just wanted to show you a couple of images, right? Remember that the priests of the IDW are talking about Nazis on Nazi Twitter have a yearning to take things back into the past. They want to go backwards, kind of like this, to get New Zealand back on track. So that would resonate with Nazi Twitter, right? Because it's a backwards looking thing, kind of like this. Let's take our country back again. That would resonate on Nazi Twitter. Because Nazi Twitter is about looking back, and it's all the left's fault. Kind of like this. Trump's campaign for 2024, take America back. That will resonate on Nazi Twitter. And remember, when I say Nazi Twitter, the Nazi Twitter we're talking about is the Nazi Twitter that Brett Weinstein, I'm going to keep saying it, has described as the places that swastikas are not viewed as negatives. Literal Nazis. Yep. So what's happening, and we've talked about Luxon's dilemma, is these people are needing to send dog whistles to that group. And let's be honest, not all Nazis, but Nazi adjacent, white supremacist adjacent, racist adjacent, racially charged, Illinois Nazis, whatever. And having to get them, and if what these evolutionary biologists are telling us that they're seeing is it's about looking back, it's exactly what the right's doing at the moment. So they're actively speaking to Nazi Twitter. They're actively speaking to white supremacists, and they're actively speaking to that group because they need their fucking vote. I've got one more clip, Chewie, but you go, sir.
I just want to expand on a couple of points, right?
Go.
These guys might be very smart. They might be evolutionary biologists or whatever, but what they're talking about is sociology, which is a completely different area. And if she wants to talk about the left, this is the left's problem. The left wants Star Trek. That's what we want.
Yeah, sure.
You know, that's the aim, and
or at least the Jetsons. At the very least, the Jetsons.
Right wing want 1935. So that's the dichotomy. There's probably 150 years between them. We're not talking about winding the clock back 150 years. And the other thing that I want to say is, whenever someone says Nazi, right, I'm always kind of careful about using it because it does get overused.
Of course, I agree.
But you know, if you're pitching at that crowd, it's not that all of your supporters are Nazis. But if the Nazis are agreeing with what you're saying, you have a problem. That's all we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And I've always had a problem with slogans like, let's go back. We've gone too far. Let's wind the clock back. Because there's a lot of people that if you wind the clock back even a little bit, then they're back in the closet, or they have legal ramifications for the way that they live their life, and that sort of thing. You know, when Trump was saying, you know, make America great again, the big question that a lot of people were asking is, when was that?
Yeah.
Was it the 1980s? Was it the 1950s? Was it the 1930s? Tell us when, because there was a lot of things that are different there. Quite specifically, how do we treat black people? You know, and that was what the concerns that people had. And I think in the fullness of hindsight, those people were right. That like it has opened up an ugliness in the entire world that we can't stuff it back in the toothpaste tube.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, that's the problem when you point at a whole group of people and go Nazis. We're not accusing you all of being Nazis, but we're saying that the Nazis that are there are agreeing with you. That's a problem. Fix it.
And we've said this, I probably said this twice tonight, but I say it every time. No one's suggesting that everyone who votes for ACT or everyone who votes for National is a Nazi. But if the Nazis are voting for them, the white supremacists are voting for them, the racists are voting for them, that's still a question to be looked at, you know, and that's still a dilemma. I mean, like, I don't know, why hasn't Luxon come out and completely denounced it? Why hasn't he come out saying, you know, I do not want a white supremacist voting for this party. I do not want someone who doesn't believe in, you know, everyone equal to vote for this. However he words it, he hasn't done it. Let me play this last one, because this last one sort of relates a little bit to what's happening in New Zealand at the moment. Because the last clip is back to Brett Weinstein. It's only 90 seconds. And he's talking about the melting pot, otherwise known as things like, I don't know, the racial breakdown of a country, the melting pot. Mm-hmm. And remember, just to reset this up, this is what he is seeing on Nazi Twitter, right? His definition, Nazi Twitter, he spelled it out. This is what he is seeing. And what he is seeing is on Nazi Twitter, them saying the melting pot hasn't worked, right? That a multicultural society hasn't worked. That's that's what Brett Weinstein is saying. He is seeing on Nazi Twitter. I'll play this clip for you, and then we'll wrap up the show.
But over in Nazi Twitter, it is very common to hear that the melting pot is a failed experiment. Now, the melting pot is not a failed experiment. The melting pot was one of the greatest ideas that anybody ever had. And you can tell that by how much was accomplished by this, yes, broken melting pot. Did we ever actually melt together? Not in the way that the founders might have expected. But
we were getting there. So,
yes.
You know, lest you or we sound like, well, the problem isn't with communism, it's that true communism has never been tried, right? Like, lest that we seem to be making that facile argument.
Oh, that's so tired.
You are not saying, well, but it wasn't really a melting pot. Like, we were getting there. We were moving in the right direction, and it was getting better and better and better through, at least, you know, the timeline for me sort of starts at my consciousness, but it feels like, you know, mid-70s through at least really the millennium, we were moving in the right direction. Yes,
and if you're over in Nazi Twitter, get out. Remember who we are. Stop doing this. It is not the program you want to enact. There is nothing honorable about it. And even if you win, at the end of the day, you are doing something that anyone, if we survive another 1,000 years, the people that you would most like to hang out with, the most decent, the most intelligent people, will look at what you did and they will say, God damn you. Why did you do that?
This is a really important point, and I'm going to play it again. What he's saying is if you're over on Nazi Twitter, or if you have that ideology, you're on the wrong side of history. Right? Because he's saying, get out, and in 1,000 years, you'll be damned for it. Listen again. He's saying that if you adhere to these ideologies, if you don't think the melting pot, i.e. multiculturalism, is a good thing, or is working, or should work, then you're on the wrong side of history.
Remember who we are. Stop doing this. It is not the program you want to enact. There is nothing honorable about it. And even if you win, at the end of the day, you are doing something that anyone, if we survive another 1,000 years, the people that you would most like to hang out with, the most decent, the most intelligent people, will look at what you did and they will say, God damn you. Why did you do that?
So there you go. That is the clips I wanted to play for you tonight. I'm not quite finished though, because what I want us to think about is the idea of, we use the term multiculturalism, melting pot, whichever you want to use, right? That I start to think about things like Julian Batchelor's tour.
Yeah.
I start to think about things like co-governance. I start to think about things like Treaty of Waitangi issues. I start to think about the sorts of things that David Seymour's talking about, that if anyone's decided based on race, ACT will be there to stop it. And I think these are the people that Brett Weinstein on some level is describing, saying the kinds of things that are popular on Nazi Twitter. If what you're saying is popular on Nazi Twitter, then I suspect you either want to speak to Nazis or you need a little bit of self-reflection. And to wrap up this part of the thing, just to remind us all as to the kinds of people and what happens, is do we all remember Christopher Luxon's sign off to Joe Hawke? He wrote, well, I don't know if he wrote it, but it was written in Māori for him. And it was put on his Facebook page, and it had a huge pushback because the kinds of things that the right is saying is popular on Nazi Twitter. So when you say something that's not popular, Nazi Twitter, I'm now using it colloquially, people who aren't that happy about the melting pot, people who don't want to have multiculturalism come out of the woodworks. So some of the comments, the post was met by a large number of commenters objecting to the use of te reo Māori to remember a Māori leader who fought for Māori rights. Maurice Fletcher said, really, Chris, why are you trying to placate the minority by talking Māori? Joe Hawke was not in any way great to a lot of New Zealanders. Craig Stantz said, stop talking and pandering to a minority. You just lost my vote. Arthur Eagle said, speak English for fuck's sake. So sick of Māori stuff. Cheryl McGuinness said, please, English only. Perhaps this once is okay. There, little brown people. And on 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 and on. The stuff that the right is saying is attractive on Nazi Twitter. The stuff that the right is saying is attractive to white supremacists. And remember very carefully, right? And I brought it up to make sure I got it right. This is a quote from Dr. Jen Foll. Dr. Jen Foll tweeted this out. As we say in Germany, if there is a Nazi at the table and 10 other people sitting there talking to him, you've got a table with 11 Nazis.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of want to dial in on this sort of thing, right? So when we, a little bit of backstory on me. I've been, I'm a keen follower of history. I've read about World War II obsessively right from the age of 9, right? And then in my early 20s, I discovered that there was still actual Nazis around. And that was kind of a prompt to action. I've been involved in anti-racism and specifically anti-Nazi groups since I was 25. So in some cases when we talk about this, and I've seen a comment that I'm going to jump on in the chat, that I've never seen a New Zealand Nazi, that says to me two things. that you're either willfully blind or just ignorant. Maybe it just hasn't crossed into your circle. I'm not sure, but they certainly exist. But again, the thing of calling someone a Nazi, I don't do it lightly. The Nazi Party in Germany was massive, and I'm sure the vast majority of it were just good, normal, decent people that were just acting within the bounds of their society at the same time. They didn't see the harm that joining in, maybe it got them a little bit ahead in their status. It made it easier for them to get jobs. They're not all cartoonish villains, but what they all enabled was something fucking monstrous. And this is why every time I see something like Julian Batchelor's groups, like the first time I read his website, and I thought, if you swap out the word Māori on this website and put in Jews, it would be 1935.
Wow.
You know, we're not talking like all Jewish people. We're not saying that, because that's crazy. And I realize that people would shout me out of the room. I'm only talking about the Jewish elite, not the normal Jewish people. Now, you can look up his website and you'll see what it actually says. I'm not taking the piss on this comment. And that's why whenever I see a movement like that, that's in that very early stage of, you know, don't stomp on me, it's my free speech. Sometimes your speech has no value. And when you're punching down on a group and you're trying to build this movement of taking rights away from a minority group, that tweaks my 1935 gland in a way that really does make me want to combat it really hard. You know, for the person that says that there are no New Zealand Nazis, there you go. They're the white pride worldwide. Hitler did nothing wrong. Equal rights for whites. Now, you go back a few years and people will be jeering these guys. The guy at the front there is Kyle Chapman. Now, he has been prominent in the anti-vax movement. He provided security for Julian Batchelor's Christchurch appearance.
I saw his car going around Twitter the other day. There was photos of Chapman's car as security.
So if you say that there are no Nazis in New Zealand, you're wrong. And I don't know if you're just being willfully stupid or you're just not aware of this, but these guys are bubbling away, and they're bubbling away in a lot of different areas because they want to talk to more people. They know that this sort of march, this sort of behavior does not play well with the majority of New Zealanders, so they try and soften their image. And now they're talking about COVID stuff because they know it's going to open them up to a new audience. They haven't forgotten what they originally stand for, and they'll keep talking about it. And they'll keep gaining new followers. They've just found a new way. So, yeah, not everybody is a cartoonish black uniformed concentration camp commandant. Some people are just going along with the flow. It's just as dangerous.
Although those guys look quite cartoonish.
Well, Kyle Chapman is.
Yeah. Well, I told
Sorry
you.
Sorry about that rant.
No, dude, I feel like I've been ranting the whole time. I felt my blood boiling 2 or 3 times there, so I think we're done. I apologise to the text. I know that there's been a lot of messages going in there. We haven't had a chance to get to any of them, but if you want to scan anything now, but everyone's been talking to each other, so it's been great. You guys have been awesome. I am going to clip this tomorrow and I'm going to put it out. I don't ever want to kind of say, yay, we're awesome, but I think this is the kind of thing. Look, the big thing about this conversation for me is actually the right needs to check themselves. Like, and I'm not actually saying that the left shits don't stink. I think, like I talked about before with the political compass thing, I think there's many on the left whose shit stinks. I think my shit stinks sometimes. I'm not saying that I'm perfect, but for this particular issue, talking about racists, white supremacists, Nazis, the right has to ask themselves some questions. They have to ask themselves the question, why do these people like our policies? Why do these people like what we do? And if your answer is, I don't care, we want their vote, just be fucking honest about it. Like, honestly, just be honest about it. Come out and just say it. We'll take everyone's vote. Don't care what your views are. We just want to be government. If you actually abhor their vote, how much do you abhor it? Do you want to reject them so you might not win this time around? Or is winning the thing? Is it a be all and end all? You know, is it absolutely what you got to do? Now, I don't
my promise to you.
Yeah, go.
We could double our numbers, triple our numbers. If I found out that our supporting base was coming from that same area and people were saying, yeah, you're just saying it like it is, I'd pull the pin on this podcast in a fucking heartbeat.
Yeah.
I'd take up knitting rather than talk to that audience.
Yep. Knitting's kind of funky these days. It's got pretty trendy to do some knitting.
Well, actually, I probably avoid knitting because that's another weird pocket of white supremacism, weirdly enough.
So, I mean, we have a audience that certainly swings left without question. We have the odd troll that comes in. I, in fact, blocked someone on Twitter today. I've been on Twitter for 14 years and I've blocked 3 people. I blocked someone on Twitter today, and it wasn't because I cared about their views. It's because talking about what we talked about earlier, to do with protests and to do with free speech and to do with assaults, it was spelt out several times, and it just didn't actually matter. The person just kept on going on and on and on with their same talking points. I'm like, it's not that it offended me or upset me, it was pointless. Like, there was no conversation going there. I say this a lot when I'm talking to people of different positions. I say to them, are you prepared to change your mind? And if they say no, I go, well, thanks anyway, I'm not looking for an argument. You know? I'm not looking for an argument. I don't need it. If you're not prepared to change your mind, what's the point? If you are, I'm prepared to change my mind. If you're prepared to change your mind, then let's have a conversation. Not on everything. There's some things I'm not going to change my mind on. And if those things are there, there's no point having a debate with someone. But there's other things that I'm prepared to change my mind on. And if you are, then let's have a chat, no matter where your position is. And if you're not,
that's a much more interesting conversation, right?
Yeah.
I had a friend once. We used to play video games together, and we were like cats and dogs. We were opposite sides of the political spectrum. He was hardcore national borderline ACT. I was on the other side. We used to just be at each other's throats online. Put us in the same room together, we would just be discussing these things over a beer, and it was a much more interesting conversation. It's just online we both turned into demons.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's some bridges that can't be crossed. You know, we jinxed it last night by saying we very rarely ban someone. I banned someone tonight because he came in and called us fucking morons and then dum-dums. And I'm sorry, I will not abide being called a dum-dum.
Like one dumb? Dumb's okay, but dum-dum that's
fine.
A line. We won't go over that line.
Yeah.
There you go. There's next t-shirt. Hashtag dum-dum. Very good. All right, guys, that's us for tonight. I told you it was going to be in depth and longer. Hopefully you got something out of it. This will be a clip tomorrow. There might be several clips coming out with this tomorrow. If you think it's worth sharing around, share it to your right-wing friends. Share it to your racist Uncle Bob. You know, if nothing else, like, here's the question, yeah? If nothing else, Uncle Bob, why do you and all these white supremacists agree with this issue? Why do you and the Nazis think the same thing about this issue? No, Uncle Bob, not saying you're a Nazi. No, don't be silly. Not saying that. But why do you think it is that you and all of these people who you think maybe are disgusting, that I think are disgusting, have the same view on these things? What do you think it is? What makes you these same bedfellas? Self-reflection, man. If we can get it to happen, it might make a difference. It probably won't make a difference. Look, this is actually to society. I'm not even talking politics. This could make a difference to the world. You know what I'm saying? To how we live. Why do you think that you have the same position as all these people who, if they were in 1936 Berlin, they'd be wearing brown shirts? Why do you think you have the same position as them?
Curious.
Let's see what they say.
Just asking questions.
Just asking questions. All right, team.
I've also been told I can't take up knitting. It's crochet. These comments are all back to back, by the way.
My niece does crochet. She's fucking amazing. Like, amazing.
Well, I'm not going to do it, and if I can't be the best straight away, there's no point.
I actually said to her when I was up in Auckland last time that we should start her a YouTube channel. She's that good. She could have, like, you know, millions of views. She's amazing. She's 14 years old and she's making all these amazing things. All right, team. Imagine that. My 14-year-old niece comes and joins the team and gets 1,000% more views than we ever get.
Just crochets in the background.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you tonight. Appreciate you sticking with us. Good numbers all through the night, actually. And we'll catch you tomorrow night from 9 p.m. I'm not sure what we're going to be doing. As I said, Victoria Jakobs, I've reached out to someone who's reached out to someone who's reached out to someone who said Victoria Jakobs would like to speak to us. Would be happy to. Victoria is keen to be interviewed. Can I pass on your number? Of course, I said, fuck no. No, I said, of course you can. So, you know, maybe tomorrow night, maybe not. We'll see what happens. We'll play it by ear. Thanks for joining us, guys. Been a good show. Appreciated your time. I'm sweating. because it was a heavy brain show. Think now my brain's off switching.
Brain sweat.
And we'll catch you tomorrow night from 9 p.m. for another edition.
Hit that like button. Do it now.
Every team.
Do it now.
Bye-bye.
Tell a friend. Bye bye.